Several African writers did significantly shape the 20th century, leaving a lasting impact on literature and culture. These writers explored themes of colonialism, identity, and social change, often using their work as a form of resistance and cultural affirmation. Here's a more detailed look at some of these influential writers. Chinua Achebe is regarded to as the most dominant and influential writer of modern African literature. He has been called the father of African literature, the founding father of African literature, as well as the father of the African novel in English. Chinua Achebe is one of the most important figures in African literature. His novel Things Fall Apart is one of the most widely read and influential African novels ever written. Things Fall Apart tells the story of Okwonko, a traditional Igbo man who struggles to maintain his way of life in the face of British colonialism. Things Fall Apart is a foundational text that is widely studied and translated in various languages worldwide. Chinua Achebe wrote Things Fall Apart, exploring the impact of colonialism on the Igbo society and challenging the Western representations of Africa. His other works include No Longer at Ease, Arrow of God, A Man of the People, Antilles of the Savannah, There Was a Country, Girls at War, The Drum, Chike and the River, Home and Exile, Hopes and Impediments, among other publications. Ngugi wa Thiong'o was a Kenyan author and academic who has been described as East Africa's leading novelist and an important figure in modern African literature. His literary works explore colonialism, neo-colonialism, and social justice. Ngugi wa Thiong'o explored the impact of colonialism on African identity and culture, often advocating for the use of African languages in literature. His novel, A Grain of Wheat, is considered to be one of the most important African novels of the 20th century because it explores the complexities of colonialism, betrayal, and redemption in post-colonial Kenya. The novel further delves into the psychological impact of colonialism on individuals and the challenges of achieving true freedom after independence. His other works include The River Between, Weep Not Child, Devil on the Cross, Petals of Blood, Decolonizing the Mind, The Trial of Dedan Kimathi, Wizard of the Crow, Perfect Nine, Dreams in a Time of War, Moving the Center, Bath Dreamweaver, Wrestling with the Devil, and many, many more. Mariama Ba was a Senegalese author and feminist whose two French novels were both translated into more than a dozen languages. Her frustration with the fate of African women is expressed in her first novel, So Long a Letter, which depicts the sorrow and resignation of a woman who must share the mourning of her late husband with his second younger wife. The novel So Long a Letter was awarded the first Noma Award for publishing in Africa in 1980. The second novel by Mariama Ba, entitled The Scarlet Song, also gained international attention. The theme on polygamy dominates the entirety of the novel, along with the themes of African tradition and cross-cultural marriages. The novel Scarlet Song showcases the urgent need for women to create empowered spaces for themselves. Mariama Ba also wrote a 1981 article with the title The Political Function of Written Literature, stating that every woman should be proud of her strength and accomplishments. Mariama Ba believed that each woman should contribute as well as participate in Africa's growth. Mariama Ba further published a book on education in colonial Senegal and even contributed to essays in African newspapers and periodicals favoring women's rights as well as putting an end to colonialism in Africa. Although her literary works remain feminist ideas, Mariama Ba did not appreciate the feminist label, insisting that her writings aimed at promoting an African perspective that valued mutual respect and equality between genders. Mabel Dove Dankar was a Ghanaian journalist, political activist, and a creative writer. Mabel has a resume which reads like that of a superstar. She first started out as a journalist writing for newspapers in the 1930s, namely the Times of West Africa, African Morning Post, the Daily Graphic, Nigerian Daily Times, and Accra Evening News. Then Mabel joined politics in the 1950s and became the first woman to be elected as a member of any African Legislative Assembly. Thereafter, she ventured into the world of creative writing, creating awareness and the need for self-governance through her literary works. Mabel Dove Dankar strongly advocated for the fundamental human rights while denouncing foreign domination. With this advocacy, her articles won her great public popularity as she dared women to denounce imperialism and to fight for their rights. Mabel was the second woman to ever edit a newspaper in Ghana, although she was demoted just 5 months into office because of disagreements with the then CPP leader Kwame Nkrumah over her editorial methods. Mabel Dove Dunker was a prolific author for over a period of 4 decades. Her published collections of short stories include The Happenings of the Night, The Adventures of the Black Girl in Her Search for Mr. Shaw, Anticipation, The Torn Veil, Payment, Invisible Scar, and Evidence of Passion. Unfortunately for Mabel, her writing career was cut short, for she became blind in 1972. A collection of her works entitled Selected Writings of a Pioneer West African Feminist was published in 2004. Wole Soyinka is a Nobel laureate, renowned playwright, poet, and essayist. Wole is the only writer on this list of the greats who is alive and well at the ripe age of 91 years. Wole Soyinka is widely regarded as one of Africa's greatest writers and one of the world's most important dramatists. Wole Soyinka was awarded the 1986 Nobel Prize in Literature for his wide cultural perspective and poetic overtones, fashioning the drama of existence. Wole Soyinka has written 3 novels, 10 collections of short stories, 7 poetry collections, 25 plays, and 5 memoirs. Many of Soyinka's novels and plays are set in Nigeria. Similarly, Wole has written many satirical pieces which appealed to a wider public and sold in large numbers. Wole Soyinka achieved success with his plays including The Swamp Dwellers, The Lion and the Jewel, The Invention, which was produced at the Royal Court Theatre in London, and his first work to achieve that fame. Soyinka wrote a number of literary works including The Interpreters, Season of Anomi, Chronicles from the Land of the Happiest People on Earth, Harmattan Haze on an African Spring, The Trials of Brother Jero, Ake, The Road, You Must Set Forth at Dawn, The Beautification of the Area Boy, Isara, among many other works. I would say, in my opinion, that Wole Soyinka is indeed the great of the greats in the literal world, but his delivery is somewhat complex for any regular audience. Overall, Wole Soyinka's works often explores themes of identity, culture, and power. His play Death and the King's Horseman is a classic of African theatre. Grace Ogot was a Kenyan author, nurse, journalist, politician, and diplomat. Grace was the first Anglophone female Kenyan writer to be published. Grace was also one of the first Kenyan members of parliament, as she became an assistant minister and the only woman in the cabinet of the then president Daniel Arap Moi. In addition to her experience in healthcare, Grace Ogot gained experience in multiple different areas, working for the BBC Overseas Service as a scriptwriter and an announcer on the program London Calling East and Central Africa. She also operated a prominent radio program in the Luo language, and she also worked as an officer of community development in Kisumu County, as well as a public relations officer for the Air India Corporation of East Africa. In 1976, Grace Ogot chaired and helped found the Writers Association of Kenya. Grace Ogot became motivated to publish her works, which she did both in the Luo and the English languages. A Year of Sacrifice appeared in print as Ogot's first published work in the Africa's journal Black Orpheus in 1963. Her other published works include Then Rain Came, Promised Land, The Strange Bride, The Other Woman, Land Without Thunder, The Graduate, The Royal Bid, and Princess Nyilak. Many of Ogot's stories are set against the scenic background of Lake Victoria and the traditions of the Luo people. One theme that features prominently within Ogot's work is the importance of traditional Luo folklore, mythologies, and oral traditions. Another theme that often appears throughout Ogot's work is that of womanhood and the female role. Throughout her stories, Grace Ogot demonstrates an interest in family matters, revealing both traditional and modern female gender roles, followed by women, especially within the context of marriage and Christian traditions. Critics of Grace Ogot have suggested that her emphasis on the importance of female marital role, as well as her portrayal of women in traditional roles, creates an overwhelmingly patriarchal tone in her stories. However, others have suggested that women in Ogot's works also demonstrate strength and integrity, where their bravery is showcased in their strong sense of duty. Prior to Kenyan independence, while Kenya was still under a colonial regime, Grace Ogot experienced difficulties in her initial attempts to have her stories published. This is because colonial publishers were perhaps afraid that the radical writers would become critical of the colonial regime. 3 novels by Grace Ogot were posthumously published in 2018. Eskia Mfalele was a South African writer, educationist, artist, and activist who is celebrated as the father of African humanism and one of the founding figures of modern African literature. Eskia Mfalele wrote 2 autobiographies, more than 30 short stories, 2 verse plays, and a number of poems. Eskia is described as the Dean of African letters. Eskia Mfalele made history by becoming the first person to graduate with a distinction in his Master of Arts degree from the University of South Africa in 1957. From 1966 to 1968, under the sponsorship of the Fairfield Foundation, Eskia Mfalele became a teaching fellow in the Department of English at the University of Denver, Colorado, where he earned his PhD in creative writing. Eskia further obtained his teacher's certificate at Adams College in 1940. He also served as a teacher and a shorthand typist. Eskia Mfalele's protest against the introduction of Bantu education resulted in his teaching career being cut short. As a result, Eskia was banned from teaching anywhere in South Africa by the apartheid government. Consequently, Mfalele left South Africa, went into exile, and spent 20 years in exile, 4 of which he spent in Nigeria, and the rest he spent in France, Kenya, and the USA. His published works include Down Second Avenue, The Living and Dead, The African Image, In Corner B, Man Must Live, and many others. After 20 years in exile, Eskia Mfalele finally returned back home in South Africa and continued to contribute towards the development of the country, and his continent's literary development is still being celebrated in many forms, with some towns choosing to name significant streets of South Africa after him. The first comprehensive collection of his critical writing was published under the title Eskia in 2002, and in the same year, the Eskia Institute was founded, honoring his life, teachings, and philosophies. Eskia Mfalele's life and work is currently found in the efforts of a non-governmental, non-profit organization based in Johannesburg. So there you have it.